Okay, welcome to the live stream for September 19th, 2018. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So welcome, Camilla, Eileen, Beverly, Sam. Hey, Sam, Hope, Andrea, Jennifer, C. Finn, Bobcat, up yours, Narc. Asks, hey, I thought you were off tonight. No, I took last Wednesday off. I went out of town on a little mini vacation. That was, I don't know, interesting to say the least. It was with some family, so that's always, family stuff. But the big takeaways from that was that I need to make these little mini vacations more of a priority, and that I really want to make time on a regular basis to spend with nourishing, supportive people. So those are my two big takeaways from last week. And it was good. We went out to Lake Michigan, which I love. So anytime I get to spend time on any lake, I'm always thrilled. So let's see. We've got lots of people on tonight. The Italian guru says, I am totally broken and shattered. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, first off, but you are in the right place. And I think every person that finds these types of channels feels that exact same way. So you are in some good company. And hopefully with the support here and possibly with the support group, if you've been able to join that, we can help kind of get you through this time. Because these times of feeling profoundly broken, they can feel like they last forever, but they don't. The pain does lessen. Many of your best days are still ahead of you. You can rebuild from this. Camilla says, Dana, how do we pick ourselves up when we feel out of positivity and feel burned out? I think when we start feeling like that, that's a really big sign to turn inward and to take some time off. Like if you're feeling really burned out, if you're just coasting on fumes, to do something that helps you recharge. And, and that depends on the person. Everybody's different. So for me, it's going out into nature, going camping, spending time at a lake, being around a bonfire, just being outside does it for me. But other people might need something else. So it's kind of knowing yourself and like what really helps to recharge your batteries during times like these. And then I think it's important to do this on a regular basis. I think so many of us are so used to being so out of tune with with self-care, really, and our own wants and needs and all of that. And we wait to take care of ourselves until we collapse or we're so burned out that we're forced to take time off work. We get sick. Something happens where we have no choice other than to make some degree of self-care a priority. And it doesn't have to be that way. If we can schedule these things on a regular basis, and it can feel selfish. It can feel like, oh, I don't have the time. I don't have the money, these things, but that's not true. Like we just need to make that a priority. It doesn't have to be like I said, it doesn't have to be this huge, expensive, week-long trip somewhere. It can just be a few hours going for a hike in a forest or, going out to a museum or going and just getting lost in a good book or a good movie, whatever helps you to recharge. Yeah, Sam says maybe going to your local park and breathing some fresh air. Yeah, that's huge. The Italian guru says, I now see I have fallen victim to this. I have read so much on gaslighting and trauma bonding and more. Yes, it's very eye-opening, isn't it? And I'll tell you, and I think most people here will tell you as well, it's a whole rabbit hole. And what most people tend to find these types of channels when they're in so much pain and confusion and they're just suffering so much. And if you stick around and you start kind of digging deep after you kind of get some of that energy back, there's so much personal growth that can be squeezed out of this. It's an absolute just game changer. So I hope that you stick around and we can help you with that. Let's see. What was I going to tell you? Oh, next week is book club. So next Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, book club. We'll go for about an hour or two. And the book that we're going to be discussing is Facing Love Addiction by Pia Melody. And I will be curious to know what you think of this book. There's always things, I love Pia Melody. There's things about this book I really like, and there's things about it that are very concerning to me that we definitely need to address. So I'll be curious. I'll be curious to see what you guys have to say about it. Dora says, we are cracked, not broken. Yes, I think that's a good way to look at it too, because paying attention to the words that we use to describe what we're going through to ourselves is really important. And realizing we might feel profoundly broken, but yeah, we might be pretty bruised up, or we might even feel cracked, but you're not broken. Like, we can rebuild, we can repair, we can come out on the other side of this. Mary Ann says, I'm leaving my narcissist tomorrow. Well, best of luck to you. I hope you keep us posted. And I hope everything goes as well as can be expected. Okay, let me scroll down here. Slavic Princess is recommending affirmations and praying. There's a lot to be said, I think, for both when we're feeling really when you're just kind of down on your knees and in pain like that. Anything that can give you a sense of comfort and hope that this won't last forever, and that there is a future, and that you can move forward, and it is available for you as well, can really help a person. I'm a huge fan of affirmations. I was also, when I was going through all this, I was listening to a lot of Joyce Meyer, and Joel Osteen, even though I don't identify as being Christian. The positivity in their message, the forward momentum. Joyce Meyer just speaks with such strength and conviction, and the way that she framed certain things in very kind of black and white terms about kind of good and evil, really identified strongly with that, with what I was going through. And it really did help me. And I was going through a tremendous amount of depression and just absolute anxiety and overwhelm. And it really helped. I had posters, and I don't know if I still have them, but I went to, I think I went to Michael's or Walgreens or someplace like that and bought some poster boards, and I did the Serenity Prayer on one. I posted that above my staircase. I made a poster saying something like I believe that something good will happen to me and through me today, because I made that poster because I didn't believe that, and I wanted to believe that. And trauma can do that to a person. It can really freeze them in this dark place. And that's where I was. I just didn't see any getting out of feeling this way. And it was a really dark time. And so focusing on that and being like, yes, I believe that something good is going to happen to me and through me today. Yes. And then making steps to have that happen. it's a lot easier to have good things happen through you. So I was really pouring energy. I had a friend that was going through a divorce at the time, and I would send him postcards. I'd send him letters, just supporting him, and just like putting out as much good energy and support and gratitude into the universe as possible. Really, it does amazing things. Like, it made me feel so much better. So, and then I think once you realize that good is still out there in the world, it's easier to kind of see it when it comes into your own life. Because again, these situations can feel so just all consuming and negative that it might feel like nothing good is happening to you, when in reality, that's not true. That's the trauma talking. There's still a lot of good things that are happening during all of this. So taking time for gratitude, that's a huge thing, because we can't feel two emotions at the same time. And gratitude is the opposite of fear. And I don't know, for me, it was just really a big ladder that was helpful for me to climb out of that black hole. And I don't think I'm alone in that. So sometimes taking a moment to just get centered and focusing on being grateful for all of the little things, clean water, a hot shower, a roof over your head, the money that you do have in the bank, the food that you do have in the refrigerator, the support that you do have, the health that you do have. These kinds of things, it really helps. Okay, let's see. Okay, let me scroll up here. Okay, so I guess somebody was talking about journaling, and that can be really therapeutic as well, very cathartic, just to get your feelings out, especially if you're feeling anxious. I know some people struggle with journaling. They don't want to journal lying around their house, and I can totally understand that. So another alternative to that might be to have a Word document that's password protected on your computer. So that way nobody's stumbling across it, and it's just more secretive. And or something else that you can do is turn on the voice memos on your phone and then just start talking. This is something that you can do if you have a commute to work or home from work or on your lunch break or whatever. I did a lot of that, just turning on voice memos and just pouring out, this is today's date. This is how I'm feeling. This is what's going on. This is the high point of my day. This was the low point of my day. These are just some things that are on my mind, and just getting it out of your head. And you can always delete it when you're done. Gareth says hypnosis is really helpful. Yeah, Dora says that she did voice memos and she really liked that. The Italian guru says, I went no contact after she threatened me and then started hoovering weeks later, telling me she loves me and still would do anything for me. She cares for me and so on, but tells me I should hate her. And she doesn't want to hurt me, but wants to stay in my life. This sounds completely crazy. Yeah, that, I think it's times like these that it's a good idea to just take a time out and to regroup and to really think about your own boundaries and standards and deal breakers. And I'll tell you, one of the game changers for a lot of us here has been to pull things back, and not to where we don't do perpetual confusion. We don't do mental anguish. We don't do crazy making. Like, those are the new deal breakers. We don't wait for things to become threatening or to find out with we don't need concrete proof that they're cheating, that they are in fact, have a personality disorder, or that we don't wait for things to become so extreme that perpetual confusion, mental anguish, crazy making, that's enough of a reason. There's any one of those reasons is enough to leave. Like, either open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication resolves things, or it doesn't. And if that kind of communication only tends to make things worse, or only makes things better for a short time, and then boom, like you're back to square one, and it's a bunch of craziness again, and it's cheating, and it's lying, and it's gaslighting, and it's, it's hot and cold, and it's just all of this kind of stuff. Like, that's just a bunch of games. And that people that do that kind of stuff, they are a million miles away from having a healthy relationship. They're not able to be emotionally vulnerable for whatever reason, and to connect to people in like healthy, mature ways. Yes, right. Dora says, I reviewed my memos every week, then once a month. I couldn't believe how hurt I was back then. Thank goodness there is always tomorrow. Yeah, it's amazing. That's another thing, is it's amazing how quickly things can become our new normal, for better or for worse. And when we're healing, because it's such a gradual process, it can feel like we're not getting anywhere. It's like losing weight. It's like developing any new habit. It's hard. I think probably the best comparison is losing weight. You don't notice it right away. It takes consistency, and with diet and with exercise and moving along a certain path before we see results. Or like a broken bone that's healing, right? It doesn't happen right away. And so we just have to be patient and trust the process, and just keep moving in that direction that we know we need to move in. And and just being patient. But yeah, it's amazing. Like, when you look back, you're like, oh my gosh, I was at such a low place. I cannot believe I got out of that low place. And your heart just goes out for the old you in all of that. And it's amazing, to think, I think when you're on the other side of that pain, to realize just how far you truly have come. But in the day-to-day, especially during those first few months or even 6 months, it can be really difficult to see that there's forward momentum. That's why another reason I'm a big fan of being conscious about that forward momentum. And I've mentioned this before, but kind of getting a mantra or multiple mantras even, of, the best revenge is a good life, or I trust the process, or I can handle this. And then making a concerted effort to be like, okay, I'm going to take time for gratitude. Like, that's something that I can do. I'm going to really pour a lot of this energy into something positive. That might be, writing supportive letters to the good people in your life, letting them know how much you value them. It might be cleaning out your closet or your junk drawer. It might be hitting the gym. It might be any and all of those kinds of things, walking your dog, volunteering, just really focusing on just getting some goodness back into your life goes a long, long way. Joining meetup.com groups and trying new things and getting out there and meeting new people, and so many things that we can do. Okay, let's see. Lauren says, I'm having a hard time with boundaries with my boyfriend and my family. My boyfriend asks me to do things I don't want to do constantly, and my family tries to talk to me about things I don't want to discuss. Okay, so it can help in those kinds of situations to kind of think through, like, what are some ways that you can be assertive with that? So, for example, like with family, If they really wanted, I don't know, whatever they want to talk, they want to talk about your weight, they want to talk about your relationship, whatever, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not really comfortable talking about that. Or I'd really rather not talk about that. Or let's talk about something else. And if they keep pushing, you don't have to like entertain that. You can just say, if they're like, well, no, we really think that we need to talk about your weight. I mean, you have really gained weight and we're just very concerned about you in this. You can say something like, you know what, I appreciate the concern. Like I'm aware, like I'm aware that I've gained weight or whatever. I don't really want to discuss this. You know, like, or I'm not open to discussing this. Like, let's just change the topic. And if they continue pushing, just say, you know what, I feel like I need to leave. Like, I don't want to discuss this. And the thing with boundaries is boundaries are only as effective as the consequences that we have for them. It's like with children, right? If you keep telling a child, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do this, no, you can't do this. And if they know that on the 12th time that you're going to say yes or that you're going to cave in, they're going to keep pushing you until you cave in. If you finally tell them, you know, no, I said no, like conversation is over, like do not ask again. If you shut it down and they know that no means no, they're going to stop pushing you. It's like that with any type of manipulative person in your life, no matter who it is. With your boyfriend, depending on what he's trying to get you to do, if we're talking things that are on the more mild end, like he's really wanting you to see, like, I don't know, the latest Avengers movie or something, and you're like, no, I don't like movies. I don't like superhero movies, you know, whatever. Just tell him, like, you can be straight with him and just say, you know, why do we keep having these conversations? Like I said, I don't like movies like this. Can you go with your friends? I really don't want to go. Movie theaters make me anxious. The loud sounds make me anxious. Like it's just not enjoyable. I don't know. That's just the first example I thought of. But if we're talking about like more major stuff, like he's pushing you into having sex, he's, you know, that kind of stuff, that's a whole different ballgame. And you know, that's that kind of stuff, like that level of coercion, not just boundary pushes, but like coercion really needs to be deal breaker stuff. So I guess I would need more context. Okay. People are talking about a restraining order. And Andrea says, yes, you need to call every time he violates any restraining order. Yes, I agree. I agree with that. Jennifer says, I'm ashamed to admit I still want him. All I can focus on is when the silent treatment will end. I still live for the times he's good and I can't seem to break away. Any advice? I think in moments like this, you have to, a big part of breaking these trauma bonds like this is we have to learn to say no to ourselves. And that might feel really harsh, but it's like stopping any other addiction. This is going to sound harsh. It truly doesn't matter how you feel. You know, like you might really want to have a drink, but if you're a recovering alcoholic, you can't. It doesn't matter that you want to drink. Like you can't. It's opening the doorway up to hell, you know? And it's the same thing with these types of relationships. I think so many people stay in there. They're like, but I love him or I love her. And really it's like, so what? That's not a good reason to do something that we know is harmful to ourselves. So we have to really just tough love and be like, you know what? I need to get comfortable with some self-discipline and saying no. And then trying to anticipate, like, how am I going to ride these cravings out? So getting a game plan of how are you going to do this? Because it is like detoxing from heroin. It's intense. And so kind of thinking about, okay, this is what I'm going to do. So I need to start bringing some space between that craving and my action so I can start changing, because this is a habit, right? So I can start breaking that habit. I can go, if I'm feeling that crave, it's just like quitting smoking, quitting anything else. What can I do? I need to get rid of triggers as much as possible. So getting rid of anything that reminds you of him, even if you're not ready to donate it or throw it away, you can put it in a box, put it in your closet, delete his phone number. If you're feeling cravings, you can go take a shower. You can start watching, I don't know, some sort of YouTube video. You can write out one of my favorite exercises is the for when you miss him or her list, which you write down in bullet point format, every reason that you know that this relationship is toxic and why you need to go. And when you're feeling that craving, get out that list and read it. You could also make a video on your phone of you reading that list to yourself and giving yourself some tough love and just being straight up like, okay, if not now, when? Like where is rock bottom? How much more does he have to do in order to get you to leave? Just some straight, painful talk with yourself and getting that leverage on yourself, like getting crystal clear of this is going to be your life. There's no reason to think he's changed. He's obviously not changed. So how much more hurt and heartache do you want to experience? Because the reality is you will leave when the pain is great enough. But don't wait. Like it doesn't have to cost you decades of your life. It doesn't have to drag you through hell. Like you can hop off the crazy train now. So getting really clear with yourself. How much pain do I need to experience before I leave? New Life says, Dana, could you do a video on setting boundaries? I'm really struggling with working out what I think about. I tried mind mapping it, but I have too much brain fog at the moment. Yes, I can work on that. Let me make a note. I need to get back in the groove of like making shorter videos. Setting boundaries video. Yeah, let me see what I can come up with. I'm trying to think of a good, some sort of resource that you can, actually my Start Here book, let me flip open to that section because I finished the ebook. Yikes. I finished the ebook. Or not the ebook, the audiobook version of this last week. And so I'm now just waiting for it to get uploaded to Audible and stuff like that, if you're interested. But there's a section in here on my book, I'm actually changing the cover of this book, but right now it still looks like this. The Start Here book, Under Boundaries. And it goes over... there's a few pages on boundaries. There's some examples on boundaries. And then there's also a section on kind of what boundary pushes are and how people can handle them. So, and it gives different options, like what a person could, like, here's some options, because there's always options. So, are you going to say nothing and wait for them to change? Or are you going to say nothing and tell yourself that it's just you and that you must have issues from your divorce? Are you going to be assertive and tell this person that you're not okay with how they're talking to you and, blah, blah. So it gives different options that are out there. But yes, I can work towards coming up with something. Let's see. Hope says, now that I have called my husband on his covert narcissism, he says he is trying to change. 23 years. Can I trust it? I never trust words. I only trust actions. We all want, right? Like we all want things in life. I want to lose about 30 pounds. Wanting is not enough. Right? I've met family members that want to get sober. If wanting was enough, we'd all have everything that we wanted. So hope is not a strategy. Talk is not a strategy. Action is a strategy. And true change comes from changed behavior that's over a period of time. He's not going to change his behavior at the flip of a switch. So, and if he does, then he's just on his best behavior. Like true change is a process. You got to figure out, because it's not so much the behavior, it's why a person's doing what they're doing. You know, and like in AA and stuff, they talk about a person being a dry drunk. Like it's more than just stopping drinking. It's dealing with a lot of these like unresolved issues. And it's the same thing with any type of behavior change. You know, if we're talking about George Simon in his book, I think it was called Character Disturbance. I think he makes a really critical distinction that I have not heard anywhere else, but I think it should be a thing. He talks about the difference between people that are personality disordered and character disturbed. Or he calls it, I think, disordered personality, which I like that, because it doesn't matter if they have an official like personality disorder, like disordered personality versus being character disturbed. Character disturbance is deeper. Personality disorder, we're talking like maybe, you know, anxiety, obsessive compulsive, you know, certain types of problematic behavior that interfere with a person's maybe self-harm kind of stuff, emotional control or inabilities, you know, fleeting emotions, even like attachment things. Character disturbance, you're really talking about like pathological, like chronic lying, cheating, stealing. There's something fundamentally wrong. This person's behavior is just relationship destroying. That kind of stuff. And I agree with him completely. Like that's not workable. So don't get sucked in to treating it like a sex addiction or that person can change. Odds are they're just going to get better at hiding it. And they have a lot of work to do to undo whatever it is that's driving them to do that. So I just would really take some time and examine and think if you do decide you want to stay and see if things change, think about where is your deal breaker? What kind of changes do you need to see and in what time frame? And in how much money and time and energy are you willing to throw at this? And what's his plan? What's the plan? Because obviously, if just growing a moral compass or treating you with dignity, respect was as simple as a conversation, he probably would have done it 23 years ago. So his plan of changing is going to require more than a promise for him to change. Is it going to be weekly therapy? Is it going to be, reading so many self-help books? Like, what's he actually going to do? And I just caution again, even that depending on how manipulative and charming and convincing he can be, I just would even caution against that. I think you need to just get really clear about where your deal breakers are with stuff like that, because these kinds of people manipulative people will oftentimes say whatever they need to say in order to keep their relationship going. I had a coworker who was married I had a coworker and a good friend, both married for close to 20 years, on the outside looking in, charming, wonderful, like amazing men. Behind the scenes, their husbands were pathological liars, cheating with anybody and everybody, all of this stuff. And both of those people went to therapists who treated their husband's issues like relationship issues. And they're not relationship issues. That's character. Those are personality. Those are individual issues. So by the therapist treating it like, oh, it's a relationship issue, it kept them stuck in those relationships. That one friend is still in that relationship, thinking that her husband's changed. I guarantee you he's not. I mean, the guy was on Tinder, he was on Match.com, he's sleeping with everybody in town. He's already given her STDs. It's just, I think it's important to realize that when a person has that kind of relationship destroying behavior, they're not emotionally invested in the relationship. So don't confuse talk of change with the person actually changing or with them actually even caring. Because if they're doing that kind of stuff, if they're living a double life behind your back, they're not emotionally invested. Yeah, Elizabeth says exactly. And you want to believe it's the relationship when it's the other person's personality. Yes. That's the thing. I think so much of this stuff flies under the radar. And it's this mentality of like, you know, it's communication can fix everything. And that's not the case, especially when you're dealing with character disturbed people that just don't have the same moral compass or conscience as others of us do. A Cromie says, I fell for the love bombing and I wanted him to become that person he pretended to be because I felt like that person really existed. Absolutely. And that's such a huge, profound realization to realize I fell in love with an illusion. I fell in love with the fantasy that they were selling me. This is not who they are. And in some ways, I think that can help set a person free when you realize I didn't, like, anybody would have loved the person that I thought they were. Like, the person I thought they were or that they pretended to be was amazing, charming and likable and funny. Like my friend's husband, he was the youth leader at their church. He seemed like a great dad. He was super invested, his kids were in soccer, and they had fostered a child, and like he just seemed like this really loving guy. And I was shocked to find out that none of that was the truth. He's actually now facing felony charges for embezzlement. He's cheated on his wife, numerous times. I mean, it just went on and on and on and on and on. And she just kept it all quiet for all those years. I had no idea. And, thinking that kind of given enough rehab, he was an alcoholic, enough rehab and religion and therapy and love and understanding from her that he would change. And he didn't. And now he basically left the state because he's running from the law, has a new girlfriend in another state, and has nothing to do with his kids anymore. So like it never even happened. Okay, let's see. Oh, I guess what I was saying with that is that when you realize that you fell in love with the illusion, it's sort of like falling in love with an online dating scammer. That's how I thought of my situation. And it helped me to really break free from that. Because it's like, yeah, you fell in love with a facade. Like that person wasn't real. And you can still mourn that loss. You can mourn the loss of what you thought you had, but that person wasn't real. And of course, anybody would miss the person that they pretended to be. That person was awesome, but that's not who they actually are. Gareth says, Dana, did you say that you wrote a book? I have. I've actually written two. I've got the third one books 3 and 4 are in the works, and one will hopefully be out by middle of October at the latest. And then the fourth one will be out probably November sometime. But I have this one, like I said, the cover's changing. You can find me on Amazon, Dana Morningstar, and you can see all the books I've done. But this one, let me find them. I have a stack here. It's kind of like Jenga though. Hold on. Very, very precariously stacked. Okay. That's not a good setup. Okay. So I have the Start Here book, which is fantastic if you are new to all of this stuff and you're confused about a lot of the terminology about, what are flying monkeys, what are deal breakers, what is dark triad, what is narcissistic abuse. This is frequently asked questions. It has things to consider with a safety plan. There's a section for friends and family, or therapists or mental health providers in general that are trying to better understand all of this and kind of what it's like what they can expect and what it's like on our end. So there's that book. It's called Start Here. And then the second book is called Out of the Fog. And it looks like this. And this book compares and contrasts a lot of the commonly confused concepts that I see people get hung up on, that I got hung up on too. So like the difference between like codependency and commitment, the difference between sincere communication and insincere communication, the difference between, let's see, someone who is a friend and somebody being friendly, big difference. Let's see, difference between trauma bonds and healthy bonds. Being in love with them versus being in love with who they pretended to be, acting the part versus actually changing. Did I say love bombing versus love? I don't know if I said that or not. The difference between abuse and reactive abuse. The difference between hoovering and harmless communication. The difference between being judgmental and being discerning, and on and on. So, and there's different stories in here, examples from people. Lucy, who I don't know if she's still on the chats. I still periodically hear from her, but she was a big part of this book. And there's a lot of, I think, amazing insight that she shared in the different examples in here. And then I have some journals that I wrote. So this is the same, two versions of the same book. These are insight journals. These questions are designed to help a person just get reconnected with themselves. And so every day is a different question. There's a different journal, like writing prompts, kinds of things. So like, here's one, when was the last time you felt your life was off track in some way? How could you tell? And what did you do about it? And here's another one. Out of all the people you've spent time with this year, who has the most solid character and what makes it so solid? And how have you been spending the majority of your free time lately and why? So these are just full of different questions. The difference between the two books is one is a 1-year journal, one is a 3-year journal. And then I totally have forgotten to even mention this. I just published this book last week. I'm like the worst person at doing book launches. This is a gratitude journal. And there's different questions that repeat. So it asks, what was the high point of your day and why? And then it asks, what 3 things are you grateful for today and why? And then every 7th day, it rotates. So there's place for you to write a quote. There's like these little images in here. I'm freaking so in love with this little bird. I'm not even kidding. Like, it's ridiculous. I love this little guy. I had the book cover person put this little bird everywhere. Like, I'm so in love with them. So every 7th day, it either asks a quote that has really resonated with me lately, or there is some other. Let me see. Now I'm curious. What was the other rotation? Oh, so just some quotes. The little things in life aren't little at all. Here's another bird. I just think he's so cute. So yeah, and these come in hardback or paperback, and you can find them on Amazon. Again, Dana Morningstar is all of that. New Life asked, are you going to bring out an audiobook version of Out of the Fog? Yes, that is the plan. I think what I'm going to do though, before I had done all of the record, I'd recorded it. And then as I was reading it, you catch a lot of errors and like redundancy and stuff like that. So I decided I need to go through the book. I really want to clean it up and get it re-edited, and then just get it as good as I can get it. And then I'll do the audiobook version. So it's on my list of things to do. Okay, so that's that. And then the next big book Well, there's going to be a book called Rising from the Ashes. That's going to be artist. I'm doing this with an artist, and I don't know if I guess I should say her name. She's on here. Healthy Love. It'll be with her and her artwork, which is amazing. You can see it at wholeheartedarts.com. So we're doing her paintings, then snippets of like her story and then my story, and then a paragraph or so that explains what her painting is about. And they're all like about abuse and overcoming abuse. And they're really powerful. So then the book after that is going to be called, it's the Narcissist's Playbook. And it's all about manipulation and what it is, what it isn't, how to break free from it, how people tend to get caught up in it. Lots of stuff. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, Missouri Cowboy was talking about Chris Watts. He says, there's so many Chris Watts among us, monsters in our midst. And I lived with two, one for 20 years and one for 15. Yeah, it's amazing. It's terrifying is really what it is when you realize that these people are out there. And, we tend to think, sociopaths they look a certain way or they act a certain way, or that we would know, basically. And it's terrifying to realize, no, you can actually share a bed with one. And just, there's certain like things that don't add up, but anything can be rationalized, and you kind of think, oh, this person's under stress, or maybe I heard wrong, or, it's not that big of a deal. Like all relationships have issues, this kind of stuff. And then it's boom. This is why I'm a big fan of, like, if you're dealing with somebody who's got behavior that shows that they are not emotionally invested in the relationship, that's really problematic stuff. They don't care. They're not emotionally invested, especially like if you've got like chronic lying and cheating and stealing. They're exploiting the relationship. That stuff can escalate fast, and these people don't miss a beat. It just doesn't sway them at all. Okay, let's see. Sonia says, I have experienced narcissistic rage from a family member for the first time, and that was only by phone, not to think of the live version horror show. That is an eye-opener. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It's just not okay. That's a great question. Kiara says, Dana, how do we tell the difference between disassociating and letting things go? In the past, I have let people hurt me, and I thought I was letting things go, but I was disassociating. There's a blurred line. I'll be curious to see what other people have to say about this. I guess what comes to mind would be like, well, I guess when I think about disassociating, it's not so much like letting things go. Like, I think that's more like either people pleasing or denial of like, oh, no, it's fine. It's not a problem. Totally, and you just sweep it under the rug, versus like disassociating is more like totally like just numbing out and running away from it. Either you're getting lost in your busyness or some sort of like other activity, or you're just kind of checked out of the whole situation. And I guess that is kind of a blurred line. But either way, I guess if you're just associating or if you're denying something, either way, it's a problem. And if you can figure out, I guess I would focus more on like why you were doing that, instead of maybe trying to kind of figure out like how you were handling it. Because if you can figure out either way, whether we deny reality or we disassociate from it, we're doing so because we're not comfortable with reality. And if you can get more comfortable with your reality, then that kind of stuff just resolves itself. So figuring out, was it you weren't comfortable with confrontation, you weren't comfortable with like how they were going to respond, kind of what was going on there. So I have found personally, and I'd be curious to hear from others, if that kind of like denial or disassociation tended to resolve itself the more you were able to kind of like walk in your truth, and you're able to be assertive, you're able to hold your boundaries, you're able to distance yourself from other people. So I think a lot of this stuff, if we're in these different relationships because we feel like we can't or shouldn't walk away, or that we shouldn't set boundaries, or that we shouldn't distance ourselves in some way from them, if a person feels kind of like you just got to stay in this relationship, then there's only really two strategies, right? Like if being assertive or distancing ourselves isn't within our range of ways to solve problems, then all we're left with is coping or hoping. We've got to somehow cope with an intolerable situation by either pretending, basically people pleasing, twisting ourselves into an emotional pretzel, trying to do different with hopes that they'll treat us different, or hope. I hope they'll change. They gave me crumbs of hope that maybe they would change. Or maybe not even that. Maybe they've just reopened contact, but maybe someday they'll change. I hope that they'll change. Either of those things are not good long-term strategies when you're dealing with any type of problematic situation. Yeah, Gina says, hope can be incredibly destructive when your heart is broken. It's a quote from Guy Winch. Yep. I'm a big fan of the quote that hungry hearts eat lies. I think that's so powerful. I don't know who said that, but I think that's so spot on. It's just, we want so much to believe that a situation is something other than it is. And hope, what's one thing that Jack told me, I'll never forget that, was hope dies last. He knew why people stay. He knew what to say. And he was right. Gerra says, I had to people please as a way to numb things out. I feared people's reactions, and I oftentimes prided myself on not being reactive. Oh, okay. Yes. So it's amazing how this people pleasing stuff can fly under the radar, even under our own radar, of what's a problem and how it can mask itself as somehow the solution. This kind of stuff hit itself from my conscious awareness for a very long time, because I was very into Buddhism and kind of path of least resistance, and being in the present moment and not being reactive and kind of detaching, which now there's a term for this. If anybody else is doing this, it's called spiritual bypassing. And we just kind of go around the issue, and we just kind of hide it under all of these things that we think are desirable traits. And then it's just a way of us to continue doing what we're doing. But now we just feel really good in our problematic behavior. But yeah, a lot of people will do that. They'll people please as a way to numb things out. And it's a way to reduce that anxiety. And it's a way for us to think that we have some sort of control in the situation. And this was a big eye opener for me too, with like people pleasing stuff, is that kind of people pleasing that oftentimes is like ingratiating behavior. It's giving gifts to other people. It's being extra nice to them. It's trying to win their respect or their niceness or their love or their attention. And for a lot of people, especially those that struggle with codependency or have these like fears of abandonment or fears of like relationships or friendships ending, again, like if assertiveness is not in our toolkit, And if actually walking away is not in our toolkit, or distancing ourselves from a person is not in our toolkit, then we're left with all of these kind of maladaptive ways of handling a situation. Ingratiating behavior, people pleasing, passive aggressive kind of stuff, denying that there's a problem, trying to get better at walking on eggshells. And all of this can just seem as we're doing our part to make the relationship work, or that we're somehow being a more spiritually advanced person. And really it's poor boundaries and potentially some unresolved codependency stuff going on. Okay, let's see here. Gina says, my narcissist tells me that we will be connected and haunt each other until one of us dies. I'm terrified that he's right. You have control over that. And this is another big thing for a lot of people, is there's what's called locus of control. And it's where we place that control center. For a lot of people, when they've had this manipulative person in their life, especially if this has been an ongoing, especially if people have been married for decades, or this is all they've known. They just have all of their intimate relationships with parents, with friends, with other people have all been toxic. They most likely have what's known as an external locus of control. So that their control center of what they have an appropriate degree of control over in their life is placed with other people. This is deep stuff. This is so spot on. For your life to work, you have to fully own it. And you have to have that locus of control, and it has to be internal. Like, it needs to come from within. And sometimes it's as simple as realizing, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that I was giving other people all of this power. And so some signs of having an external locus of control is, kind of coping or hoping is a big one. Not feeling the ability to have some sort of impact on our environment, feeling helpless, feeling totally controlled by other people. It just goes back to not realizing that the power that we do have in this, which is boundary setting, being assertive, deal-breaking behavior, walking away kind of stuff, and reclaiming that. So your ex, if you block him, if you get a restraining order against him, if you take action, you change your phone number, if you change your email, if you do these things, then he can't contact you. And the narcissists especially live in this total like fantasy delusion, fantasy land of this idealization and this with romance and all of that kind of flowery talk of, we'll be connected until death and da 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 da. That's not how an adult talks. I mean, that's so immature. It's like something out of Twilight. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's like, no, I don't feel this connection. Like, there, you know what I mean? Like we're done. And a lot of people do, and I felt this way for many, many years. I dated a guy in high school that was completely psychotic. He was so scary. And I felt like we had this weird energetic connection. Whenever I would think of him, he's tended to surface, or I'd hear his name, or I'd hear something about him. And it was spooky. And it spooked me enough that I really was hesitant to not say his name out loud for decades. And it wasn't until, so this is something that you're experiencing where you're like, no, Dana, for real, it's really weird. I think about him and then he calls, or I see his name somewhere and he has a really unique name. His name is like, Engelbert. And every now and again, like I'll be driving and a song will come on and it's by Engelbert Humperdinck. Like, what are the odds, like real kind of seeming like that there's more of a connection there. And if that's the case, then what's going on is there's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system. This is the part of your brain that screens all incoming information to determine if it's significant to you. And if it is significant, then where does your brain need to place it, basically? So this is why, let's say, for example, you're out looking for a new car and you're like, oh, I really think I want like a, I don't know, a black 1965 Mustang. And you've got it specific in your head. And the next thing you know, you start seeing like the black 1965 Mustangs everywhere. And you're like, this is so weird. That's why, because it's in your consciousness. It's the same. Have you ever noticed that? You name your child something. You name your child Sasha, and then you're like, start meeting all these people that have kids named Sasha. Or you start thinking about, oh, I think I'd really like to take a water aerobics class. And the next thing you know, you see a flyer on a door for water aerobics. Like, there's nothing mystical about this. It's your brain. It's a part of your brain and how it works. And it's the same thing when it comes to, it's especially the case when something registers in your brain as significant and problematic, because your brain's main function is to keep you out of danger. It's to keep you alive. So traumatic events are really in our like active consciousness because our brain is continually screening for them. So that kind of stuff takes a while for it to simmer down to where it's not at the forefront of like your subconscious mind. So, but it can feel like this real mystical connection. It can feel like, oh, this person must be my soulmate because I've never had this connection with anybody before. It's not. It's trauma. And it's the reticular activating system part of your brain that's screening your environment for anything related to them. Okay. Melania says, do I need to go to therapy for unresolved codependency issues, or can I resolve them myself? You can resolve them yourself. I think it's going to be figuring out what works best for you, I should say. There's support groups for this. I'm a big fan of support groups. If you have a therapist that you know and trust, or you can get a good referral, that a therapist that is familiar with codependency. A lot of them are not. It's not something that's in the DSM. So there's that. If you can join, I would look for groups that are about codependency. I used to talk about CODA groups, which is Codependency Anonymous groups. I don't think that they're that great, to be honest with you. I went to a few meetings and I was disappointed and horrified. Basically, there's a lot of victim blaming, and I feel like it really missed the mark, and it just wasn't as effective as it needed to be. The best book, I will say, if you're looking for codependency stuff, here's some resources. Maybe start there and then kind of think about possibly joining a support group or doing a deeper dive if you can find a therapist that really is skilled in codependency. Ross Rosenberg, that's his specialty, is codependency. I don't know if he does online counseling or not, but he has a ton of videos on YouTube. Pia Melody, which we're reading her book for book club next week, Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Facing Love Addiction. She has a whole series of these books, and she's also got videos on YouTube. They are old school. They're from the 80s. So that's always kind of fun. She knows her stuff, and so does Ross. So both of those, I think, are great places to start. I haven't read, she has a whole series called Facing Codependency, Facing Love Addiction, Facing, such and such. And I haven't read the Facing Codependency book, but maybe we should add that for the next book club book. Because I don't know. I think she really understands a lot of this stuff really, really well. The Codependency for Dummies. We did a book club. We did 2 book clubs on it because it was such a comprehensive book. That book is fantastic, and she covers a ton of ground in there. So those are some good places to start. A lot of this kind of stuff with change, it's a messy process, and it takes a lot of trial and error, and it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of self-reflection and time. And I was thinking about this today with change. We're like learning something new. I think what tends to get people off track is they think that learning something new is something that's very kind of cut and dry. Like you learn algebra, right? And it's not like that. It's when you're learning about things with yourself, it's kind of this continual, like peeling back the layers of yourself. And you can kind of get one piece, or maybe it's like a puzzle. Like you get one piece of the puzzle or one side of the puzzle figured out, and it changes how you view all of the other pieces. And then as more pieces kind of click into place, it changes the puzzle again, like the way you look at it yet again. And that's personal growth. It's just kind of this ever evolving process. But once your life starts getting to the place where it's working for you, and you kind of get over that hump, because there's this initial hump. Okay. People come to channels like this, they start learning about narcissism, and then they start kind of the next natural wave of that is they start seeing problematic behavior everywhere. They're like, oh my gosh, is everybody a narcissist? I feel like I see so many narcissists out there. And is it me? Am I being hypervigilant, or like, is this real, or what's going on? And am I just dysregulated from the abuse? Like, what's going on? And the reality is, it's that for most people, they're looking at other people's behavior clearly for perhaps the first time ever. And so they're spotting a lot of like manipulative behavior or problematic behavior. And this can be crazy making too, because they tend to use the word like, this person's a narcissist. And that kind of tends to be this catch-all word for like all kinds of problematic behavior. And this is one of the reasons I encourage people, like, focus on the behavior, not on the word, because you're going to get all kinds of people that are going to want to argue that point. And like, well, how do you know they're a narcissist? And not everybody's a narcissist, and blah, blah, blah. And you don't even need to get tangled up in all that. Like, it's the behavior, it's not the label. So people start seeing this kind of like manipulative and problematic behavior clearly. And it still takes a little bit of like practicing, of learning these. Like, your healing isn't complete until you can really you develop that internal locus of control. You start developing like your boundaries, getting clear with like your standards. You start tightening up your standards, like the Italian guru and I were talking about earlier. We don't need to wait until we don't need to wait for concrete proof that this person is indeed cheating, that they're a pathological liar. We don't need to wait for a diagnosis that they are indeed, a sociopath. We need to tighten all that up and like reel that way back and start getting some healthier standards of like, I don't do perpetual confusion. I don't do mental anguish. I don't do crazy making. These conversations can't be resolved with like healthy, assertive, like open, honest communication. I'm done. Like, there's nothing there. It's just games at that point. Like, really reeling stuff in. Those kinds of things are a big part of like the healing plan. And so when a person gets over that hump, where they're paranoid, they're like, I feel like everybody's a narcissist. I don't know how to keep myself safe, this kind of stuff. The other side of that is where that focus then shifts, where we're starting to focus on us, focusing on standards and boundaries and deal breakers, and that internal locus of control where we're learning to trust people. Here's the shift with trust, okay, is most people, and you might even hear mental health professionals say this, and I totally disagree with this, but people will talk about that they go about trusting people. They just freely give their trust until it's been damaged or broken, and then they pull back. And I think that's where people go wrong. And it might not have harmed other people. They might not have ever come across a sociopath. So like that approach of like, I just trust completely until it's broken and then I'll, respond to it. I think that's a problem. Trust is something that's earned. So it's shifting how we trust things. It's sort of like, I don't know if you're trustworthy or not. So I'm going to go slowly. I'm going to open up slowly. I'm going to get to know you slowly, not because I'm afraid that you're going to hurt me, but because I value my energy, my emotions, my time, my body, myself. And I'm not seeing you clearly because I don't know who you are. And it's going to take a little while for me to figure that out. So that's a big shift. And then once you realize that you're not helpless, like this goes back to like hoping is not a strategy. So people, when they're healing, they're like, oh, and I get it. I so get this. Or they're like, man, I hope that I met this new person. They seem so amazing. I hope that they're not a narcissist, or I hope they're not going to be abusive. And I get it. What people hope that that's not going to be the case. But the reality is we have more tools in our toolkit than just hope. We have more than just hoping and coping. We have boundaries and standards and deal breakers and being able to be assertive and not needing concrete proof. Like if things are squirrely, if they're not working for us, we can handle it. You can handle it. You have the power. You have control over your own life. You set the pace. You decide what's okay for you and what's not okay for you. Like other people don't get to vote on that. Like you don't need to sit there and there's a whole acronym called JADE, justify, argue, defend, and explain. You don't need to stand there and jade your boundaries to other people and be pushed into doing things that you don't want to do. Okay. Good. I'm glad, Filler. Says, thanks, Dana. We needed to hear that. Kiara says, Dana, I'm in college and my narcissistic mother is always calling me and terrorizing me from a distance. I feel like I can't heal and move forward and making permanent change with her lurking in the shadows. Okay, so these kinds of situations, I know it's especially difficult when it's family. There's certain things that you can do. Okay, you can start anticipating, this is how my mom acts. She's always acted this way. She shows no signs of insight into wanting to do anything different. So she's probably going to continue acting this way. Because of that, now you can start anticipating her behavior. So sending her messages to voicemail. You don't need to answer the phone. Start getting really busy. If being assertive with people like that are that extreme, being assertive often does not work. And depending on the situation, like if she's supporting you financially or kind of what have you, a person can really feel kind of painted into a corner of like, I have to have some communication because she's helping me, but like, trying to get underneath a person like that, getting out from underneath their thumb. So if one of the main reasons that you do have contact with her is because if she is helping you financially, seriously, getting some student loans or getting a job or doing something to where you're not relying on her for anything. And then you just start staying really busy. You start distancing yourself. You make keeping your sanity a priority. And, it takes practice. I mean, I had a friend who had a mother who was just ridiculous. She was so awful. And she ended up moving out of state. She got accepted into a PhD program and moved as far away from her mother as she could because she's like, I can't. The guilt and the pressure. Her mother really expected her. She didn't want her going to any college, even for a bachelor. She didn't want her going to college at all. She wanted her to stay home and take care of her. And it was all this inappropriate guilt that she was putting on her. I raised you. I gave birth to you. You owe me. How can you just leave me? You're so cruel, blah, blah, blah. And her brother got out of that house when he was 18. He joined the military. And my friends stayed around. She went to school locally and lived at home. Her mother would never let her live on her own. She just put so much guilt on her that my friend felt like she couldn't leave. And, then she would try to leave. And then her mom would, there was one time her mom fell down the stairs. I would put money on it that her mom threw herself down the stairs. She was doing stuff to be like, see, I need you. I'm lost without you. And, who's going to be there for me? That kind of stuff. So I don't know, if you're dealing with that kind of stuff, you'll have to get to a place where you figure out where your line is and what level of communication or connection you want to have with her. Like where it doesn't impact your sanity. And it's not easy. And there's no shortage of family that's going to try to get you to do what they want you to do because it makes them anxious if you change. But you get to decide. Okay. People, Ria, I saw had made a comment about being ghosted and then getting closure, and says like he hoovered her and then he ghosted her all in all areas of life. 2 hours later, she says, I feel like I'm not sane. No, that's what they do. Like totally within their playbook of things that they do. And there comes a time when we realize that we're on this merry-go-round from hell with them, where it's this push-pull, hot, cold, sweet, mean, crazy-making merry-go-round from hell, realizing that the only way off is to jump off and to just walk away and never look back. Like there's nothing there. There's no semblance of a healthy relationship to be had with somebody that's doing that kind of stuff. Like those are deep, like avoidance issues. Those are deep attachment issues. Those are deep, obviously really immature communication. Like there's just nothing, there's nothing there. And so reaching out for them, trying to get closure from them, you have closure. Like the crazy making merry-go-round from hell and the push-pull, the sweet, mean, the hot, cold, that is your closure. It's the validation of, I want to get off the crazy train. So then you've got to give yourself closure. Like you have the clarity. This is crazy making. Okay. When you have clarity of like, this is not like assertive communication, nothing works with these people. Like this is insanity. I'm just done. Like, I don't care what's going on with this person and I need to not care because it doesn't matter. I just need to get off the crazy train. Then we can start giving ourselves closure. And so you can look at that behavior and you can use that. So one of the ways that you can give yourself closure is seeing that kind of behavior and realizing, you know what? I value realness. I value authenticity. I value people with emotional depth, people that when I leave their company, I feel empowered. I feel nourished. I feel like this is I had quality time with a quality person. Like that's what you aim for. And that kind of stuff loses its appeal very quickly. And any of those feelings of the good times, the lure, it helps to look at it as like an online dating scammer of the person that you fell in love with, the person that you thought he was. This was the fantasy. He sold you a fantasy. It's not reality. It's just not reality. Sometimes you just got to close that. You got to close that door and just walk away. Okay, let me see. Okay, so Ria says, Dana, I realize I'm having abuse amnesia. I should be mad. And a lot of that abuse amnesia, that's cognitive dissonance at play. So it's us, basically we're in denial. Like we're wanting the situation to be something other than it is. And that's a crazy making place for a person to be. And we're like, I know this is a problem, but I'm wanting to hold on to hope that this is not a problem because they were so amazing and I'm so emotionally invested in them and I really want it to work out. But all of everything that they're doing is like, I can't, it's a no-go. Like this is not workable, but I want it to be workable. And when your brain starts doing that, the yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, that's the result of cognitive dissonance, and that mental distress is mental anguish. And so when we were talking about earlier, if you can tighten up your standards to be like, okay, I don't do mental anguish, I don't do perpetual confusion, I don't do crazy making, it helps to really make things a lot more cut and dry. So we're not holding on to hope and just continuing to get dragged down this path. So it does help to write that list out, like I was talking about earlier, for when you miss him or her list, bullet points, all of the reasons that this person is toxic for you. When you start missing him, go back and read that list. Read it. And you've got to get leverage on yourself. You've got to bring it to the forefront of your mind. This is painful. This isn't the fantasy. I keep wanting it to be something other than it is. I keep wanting that online dating scammer to be that really hot guy that said he was in the military, or that he said he was an entrepreneur and that he's overseas. Like you got to just get clear. Like this is not who they are. Like this is who they pretended to be. It doesn't matter how much you want it to be that super hot guy that they pretended to be. Like none of that's real. And if you keep living in fantasy land, you're going to keep experiencing pain, because they're going to pull you back on that merry-go-round from hell. You will eventually hop off, but it will be when you've had enough pain. But don't wait. Don't wait. Get clear. How much more pain? When? Where is my rock bottom? When have I had enough? How much more pain do I need? Yes. And Tal Denham says, check out trauma bonding. Yes. If you are not familiar with the concept of trauma bonding, that can set you free. So let's just talk about that real quick for new people that might be here. Trauma bonding is a powerful thing, and it happens to us in a multitude of different ways. Obviously, the more traumatic a situation is, the stronger the bond. Just like it's more bonding for people to go through boot camp together than for them to be in a book club together. Okay. So how these trauma bonds are forged, they're forged through what's known as intermittent reinforcement. So with intermittent reinforcement, there's sometimes a person's behavior gets rewarded and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you act in a certain way and the narcissist or the manipulative person behaves in a certain way. We have that. So basically we have that predictability, and then boom, things go off the rails. And now we don't know. This is how people walking on eggshells starts. Because there's this understanding between people, like if I treat you nice, you treat me nice, right? Like that's kind of the general understanding. When you're treating them nice and then boom, all of a sudden things are off the rails, it can be confusing. And so if a person's not familiar with this, and most of us aren't until it has happened to us, we start thinking, I must have done something. So then we start unknowingly start grinding down parts of ourselves. Oh, well, you know what? Things went off the rails when I disagreed with that person about something, or when I challenged them, or when I questioned them, or when they didn't get their way. So I'll do better next time. And then we start walking on eggshells and twisting ourselves into an emotional pretzel to try to keep this relationship going. Okay. And so how these bonds are so bonding is there's this whole flood of chemicals that's happening during all of this. So there's the the low times, and during these low times, we experience intense, because it's like an emotional roller coaster. You have really low times, followed by the good times. The really low times, your body is releasing a lot of cortisol, which is like a stress hormone, and adrenaline, and the chemicals that make up that, like the norepinephrine and epinephrine. And so it's just flooding your system with all of this fear and stress that's extreme. And then when they do reopen contact, or when things all of a sudden smooth out, it's the relief of the calm. It might not even be the good times. It might just be calm. Oh, thank goodness they texted me again. They gave me silent treatment for a week, but now they're back. Or they said that they would forgive me, right? Like, it doesn't even matter. Like, it's just that relief of, okay, things are going to be okay. This relationship is going to survive. And during the good times, the relief of the good times, because there's such a swing, you're getting flooded with like oxytocin and dopamine and all of these feel-good chemicals. And because the lows are so low and the highs are so high, there's more of these chemicals that are being released. So like what I was saying earlier, it's more bonding for people to go through boot camp than it is a book club, because a boot camp has that, right? You're getting yelled at, you're being berated, you're being basically torn down as a person so they can build you back up again. And you might have noticed this dynamic in other situations. You might have had a difficult professor or teacher, for example, and you might notice that some students really work overtime to walk on eggshells, people please. They might even think that professor is so incredibly intelligent, even though you're like, this person's a jerk. You know, I had a professor in college. This guy was an absolute idiot. He was so awful as an instructor. He could make the most simple concept complex. And he was such a jerk he made students cry. He was just such an arrogant, pompous ass. And, oh God, talk about trauma bonding. And there were two students that come to mind that worked overtime to just people please and walk on eggshells and kiss his butt. And it was ridiculous. I didn't get it at the time, but now I do. That's exactly what's going on. And so in any type of abusive dynamic, whether it's at school, with your parents, with relationships, that's why. And those extreme highs and lows, because there's such this like chemical flooding that's going on in a person's body, that level of intensity can be confused, and is often confused for love. So when people talk about, a lot of these songs and movies and music, people are like, oh, I just love, love hurts, love destroys me, love, it's just dramatic, right? Like, we're always going to be connected and no matter what, and da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, that's not love. Like, that is a million miles away from love. I had the second sociopath in my life. One of the first early warning signs of what was to come was he had told me, he said, I really like one of my favorite movies is the Johnny Cash story. And I was like, oh, I haven't seen it. And so we sat and we watched the movie together. And it's, if you're not familiar with the story, and I forget let me look at, what was her name? Johnny Cash's wife. June Carter Cash. Johnny Cash had an alcohol problem, he had a drug problem, and he had a character problem. He was just cheated on her nonstop and just had no, but it was this level of intensity all the time. And she tried everything to get him sober, to keep him faithful, on and on and on. And it's marketed as like this amazing love story. And at the end of the movie, I turned to Steve and I was like, I'm not doing that. Like, that's not love. And he was horrified. He's like, no, love is all about like going through things together. And, it's kind of us against the world. And I was like, no, it's like, they didn't go through anything together. He put her through hell and she went along for the ride. Like, that's going through things together is like going through cancer or going through like war or a bad economy or a hurricane. Like, it's not being cheated on and lied to and drug addiction and blah, blah, blah. So understanding trauma bonds and how they bond us to people, and even in small ways. Okay, so here's some ways that trauma bonds can be bonding, because it's not always necessarily like a negative thing. I think it's just something to be aware of. Like, this is just a thing, and it can happen easily. Watching a horror movie, going on a date and watching a horror movie with somebody can create a more mild version of a trauma bond, because it's this scary bad times and then the relief of the good times. Even though it's so weird, even though we're not going through it, but we're watching somebody else go through it, that can create a more mild version of trauma bonds. Doing like these like challenge courses, or you climb up a telephone pole and jump to a trapeze, and people do this kind of, or trust falls at work. Like, they have these, like, relationship building exercises. That kind of stuff creates a false sense of connection that might not otherwise be there. And it's that feeling of, we've been through so much together, right? Panic rooms, riding roller coasters, any type of situation, or escape rooms, roller coasters, these kinds of things it creates that sense of closeness that's not otherwise there. But I think if you realize it's these trauma bonds, it's a chemical cocktail. It's like a craving. It creates this craving, and it creates this feeling of, they create the pain, but only they can take the pain away. Like, you're caught in this loop. It's not logical. And if you can realize, this is not real, this is my brain screaming out for these chemicals, I need to get this fix in another way, in a healthy way. The cravings pass, just like cravings for heroin pass, or alcohol, or cigarettes, or anything else that we know is not good for us. Like, that kind of stuff does pass. Ria says, how do I find closure within myself? I think it's literally by realizing this is what it is. This is a crazy making cycle. I'm dealing with somebody who's not interested in having an open, honest, sincere, solutions-based, healthy relationship. If they were, they would act differently. So I don't do crazy making. So I'm done. And you shut the door and you walk away, and you spend your time learning about this kind of stuff. And then once, I think for a lot of people, it takes like understanding that there are people that walk this earth that have problematic personalities to such a degree that it's considered a personality disorder, and that communication and love and understanding and therapy and rehab and religion do not fix them. They are not like you. They do not have the same moral compass of you. They do not view the world in the same way as you. They are not interested in attaching to other people in any meaningful way. That you're trying to have a relationship, they're trying to play games. You just have to see it for what it is. And that can take a little while to truly see it for what it is. And the closure that you're going to get, because what is closure, right? Like, you're not going to get an honest answer from a liar. And even if you did, you'd never be able to trust it. So I guess you have to accept that you got tangled up with this kind of a person and it just is what it is. It's like getting closure with an online dating scammer. Like, it happened. There's scammers out there that do this. They pretend to be a person's soulmate and they scam them out of their life savings. Like, that's it. Like, that's it. That's how these things end. And it's less about closure, maybe more about healing. You got to focus on your self-care, focus on just being extra good to yourself right now. Yeah, Ria says, I feel addicted with no closure. And she says, you're right, there's no closure. There's just no closure. we have to give ourselves closure. So some of the things that can help is like literally giving yourself closure. You can if you have things from him, letters. Do people even write letters anymore? I don't know. Like items that things he gave you. You can gather them up. You can donate them. You can throw them away. If you're near a fire pit, you can burn them. You can have kind of this cleansing type ceremony. You can do visualization exercises where you can think about the energetic cords maybe that are reaching from him to you, and you can visualize a pair of scissors cutting the cord and sending all of that energy back to him or up to God or whatever feels good for you, to just visualize getting your own type of closure. You can do the exercise of a doorway. Well, we've done this before. We can do this tonight. Visualizing a doorway, that there's kind of this cleansing waterfall, that it's just this amazing healing, cleansing light that washes away just all of the negativity, all of the energetic cords or ties that we feel to this other person. And as we walk through, it just rinses off. Some people like to sage their house. They take a sage stick or sage incense, they burn it, and they just go room to room. Certain things like this can help a person just feel more in control and get more of that sense of closure. Yeah, Dawn says, "This is so true, Dana. My father is a narcissist. He couldn't tell the truth if his life depended on it." Yeah, I mean, when you're dealing with the pathological liar, and it's almost like the worst, like it's such a no-win situation trying to get closure, because either they're going to not give you any answer, which is really a blessing in disguise, or they're going to blame you. And then which the effect of that is then it makes a person wonder maybe, they might blame you and be like, no, you deserve that. I don't even know what you're talking about, blah, blah, blah. They'll deny their own behavior, blame you. Or they might tell you how happy they are with a new person and that they're so sorry for hurting you, but they've got themselves all figured out now. And, they hope that you're doing okay, but because they're just so happy now, which that's very, I don't even know if that's passive aggressive. I guess maybe it is passive aggressive. Definitely an act of aggression. And it's part of their devalue cycle. And the whole purpose of that is to hurt you, to make you think, oh, if you would have just held on a little bit longer, you could have had this amazing life with them. Nope. Or they tell you everything that you want to hear. I'm so sorry, you're so right. And I was just in a really bad place. And, I really dedicated to changing. And then what the result of that is then a person gets sucked back into that merry-go-round from hell. So this is why when I say there's no closure, it's all just another level of their game. It's all more manipulation and lies. Any way that you dice it, you're going to get hurt by reopening or trying to reopen communication with an abusive person. Like there's nothing there. There's just nothing there. We've got to be the one to say enough is enough and to close the door and drive on. Yeah, James says there's just no closure with the toxic person. Yes, that's a great point, Truth Seeker. Truth Seeker says, Ria, that's it. The fact that you realize it's like an addiction shows how strong of a person you are. Yes, that's you worded that so well. It's literally like overcoming a heroin addiction, but it's to another person. It's stronger. I smoked cigarettes for many years. It was definitely a lot easier to quit smoking than it was to quit all of this, quit talking to them, to give up the ghost about all of this. And that's a good point. Crystal says, and she says, Ria, and I'm sure heroin addicts have some good memories of getting high too. That's a very valid point. Yeah, just because we've got good memories of something doesn't mean it's good for us. And then Gina says, yes, we might be thinking we've gone through too much to give up. For those that have ever played poker, there's a term for that. It's called being pot committed. There's another term. There's a more technical term for this, and I'm totally drawing a blank right now. Oh shoot! Hopefully somebody knows what I'm talking about. But I play poker on. I've a World Series of Poker app on my phone. I play poker on a very regular basis, and it's amazing how this kind of stuff gets me. Even when you know better, it still gets you. So you're in for so much. You have a bad hand, but you've already bet this much, and no matter what the cards are, you're like, well, yeah, I'm already in for this much. I might as well. What's another? What's another few chips, right? Kind of. Thank you, Chiara says sunk cost fallacy. Yes. It's hard to walk away. It's hard to cut bait and just drive on. It is. But we gotta. There's nothing there. Natalie asks, what if you have a child with this person? How do you co-parent with them and get over them? I think I am not in that situation. I can only imagine how freaking difficult that must be. Oh my God. I would say you join some support groups and you talk to other members that have been there, done that. And you do your best as you can to see their behavior for what it is. You just realize, like, I fell in love with a person who is just unable to effectively attach to other people. Like, I didn't realize that such a thing existed. If I did realize it existed, I thought I'd be able to spot it. And it's okay to nurse. It's okay to have the feelings that you have. It's okay to nurse those feelings. And, it's just going to take a little longer, I think, but getting distance from them, realizing that you don't need to talk to them all the time. You don't need to stay friends for the children, that you can go through. There's third-party apps that you can communicate through. I would definitely, have a parenting plan, have everything spelled out, keep a paper trail. You don't, depending on how old your children are, if they're old enough that they can go out to the car or that they can answer the door, these kinds of things, you just limit contact as much as possible. And it does help too. The more positive things that you have going on in your life, the easier it does get to see their behavior for what it is and to lose those feelings towards them. So it's really difficult to heal. It's sort of like if a person's trying to cut an addiction, right? Like if you're trying to quit smoking or quit drinking or whatever it is. And you're just waiting for that time where you no longer feel that urge to get out there and start living your life again. You might be waiting the rest of your life. So it really, kind of like the universe hates a void. It hates a vacuum. So it seeks to fill it up. And our brain is the same way. So if there's this void in your life that this relationship has left and there's still all of these feelings and this kind of stuff, it really, truly does help. Meetup.com. I love it. It's not a dating site. It's free. A lot of the activities are very low cost or free. There's new groups that join all the time. You can always start your own group. And I encourage people, join as many groups as even sound remotely interesting. 20, 30, 40 groups. You don't even have to go to, you don't have to go to anything, but you don't have to for sure go to all of the events. You can go and it gives you something to do, especially for those times that you're feeling really low. And you can just go to meetup.com and check out like, oh, hey, you know what? I don't know, dinner and a movie group is having dinner and a movie tomorrow night. So I'm going to go do that. And I have met actually everybody that's in my life, except for Travis, but everybody else that I hang out with, I've met through meetup.com. I've met some amazing people through that website that are just like, I would have probably never met in any other way. And they were groups I joined that I like would not have ever normally joined. So, like, it's a great way to get out back into life. And I think that's the thing is so oftentimes we'll postpone living life until we've healed, but really it's living life again that helps us to heal. And I view this a lot like sort of like physical therapy, you know, like you don't wait for a broken leg, or if you've been in some sort of like terrible accident, like you don't wait until you feel like, you don't just sit there and lay in bed and wait until you fully healed to get up and start, you know, walking and range of motion stuff. Like they will start you on that stuff within hours of being in the hospital. And they do that because it's what helps. It's the more rigid we get with how we, with physically or emotionally, where we're, you know, you're just on hold. We're like, I need to wait until I'm fully healed before I start walking again, or before I start going out and meeting new people or doing new things again. That could be years, and you might never feel like it. So we can't wait. It's important to get back into the swing of things, getting that routine, meeting new people, realizing that there is life after this. It can go on. It does go on. It will go on. Being a part of it. I view it as like, I guess it's like an emotional therapy. I mean, physical therapy for your body after a bad accident. You have a kind of this emotional therapy for processing the emotional trauma after all of this. So, well, thank you, Life's Revival, for the live stream donation, and says, thank you so much for helping us, teaching us, getting us through such a painful time in our lives. You are a blessing to us all. God bless you. Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. I appreciate that. And hold on. I hit a button. And I did something. So, okay. And now the chat's frozen. Oh gosh, what have I done? Oh, there it goes. Crisis averted. Yeah, Con P says, yeah, you can do this. Work on self-care, and it does get easier. Yes. And Nikki says, I isolated myself for almost a year. Just trusting your intuition when meeting new people helps. Yes. And this is another good thing about meetup.com is, you know, you are in total control. There is no pressure. There is no expectation. You can leave at any time. And it's a great way to get out there to start practicing a lot of these skills with like boundaries, with being assertive, with learning to have trust, to have somebody earn trust, to share appropriately. There's just a lot of great practice that can come from this. And it's in probably the most, you know, kind of non-threatening, or for sure, like least emotionally invested way possible, because it's a bunch of strangers. And if somebody makes you uncomfortable, if somebody says something, if, you know, you handle something in a way that you don't like, you don't have to ever go back. Like it's just a great atmosphere to kind of practice this stuff. I think what a lot of people do, and this is something to avoid, is they think, well, I'm just going to start dating again. And I would strongly caution you to not do that. Like to really bench yourself for like a solid 6 months at least. And like I was saying earlier, you know, your healing is not complete until you've really examined your boundaries, your standards, your deal breakers, learning to trust appropriately, getting reconnected with like your intuition and your emotions and your wants and your needs and your feelings, all of that stuff. So that takes a little bit, and it takes practice. Because here's the thing, like when you're learning a new way of understanding the world and understanding the people in it, and when you realize that problematic behavior comes across in a wide variety of ways, and you're aware of like how problematic behavior feels, you understand the early warning signs that a boundary has been violated and like what you can do if that happens. You know, the signs of boundary violation are often like irritation, frustration, resentment, anger. You're avoiding that person. You're stewing about things. You're rehashing conversations. These are all signs that there's been some degree of a boundary violation that's occurred. And the way to right that imbalance is either to be assertive and bring it up. But if that assertive communication doesn't resolve anything, then now it's time to move on to the next step of, okay, then what? Then what am I going to do? And not coping or hoping, but what's the action plan? Where's the action in that? Am I going to cut this? Am I going to go no contact with this person? Am I going to start distancing myself? Like, what do I need to do here? And so, you know, but dating right away can oftentimes land a person back into a problematic situation. Because what tends to happen if a person's not in tune with the way there's so much to all of this. When people tend to first find these channels, they understand narcissism. Okay. They're tending to focus on the problematic person in their life, whether it's their mother, their ex-spouse, their ex-boyfriend or girlfriend, and they really focus on trying to figure out that person. And they're like, oh, yes, she or he did this, the gaslighting, the projection, the triangulation, the smear campaign, all of it. And we have them beautifully figured out. And then a person no longer feels emotionally devastated, and then they confuse that for healing. And they're like, okay, I'm good. I'm so much better. It's been a year now. And I got all this stuff figured out and I'm healed. And then they go on their merry way. And the downside of it, because what tends to happen with that is if there's very little value in having another person figured out. Was it Lao Tzu had once said, like, knowledge of others is wisdom, but knowledge of self is enlightenment, something along those lines. Like, it's more important that we figure ourselves out, because here's the thing, every single manipulator comes across in a different way. And so and let me just play this out for you, because I've seen this, I've experienced it, I've seen it time and time and time and time and time again. So a person, let's say they are dating, or their significant other was an overt narcissist. They were grandiose, they were arrogant, they were brash, they were belittling, they were loud, they were verbally abusive. They were like, quote unquote, like that guy or that girl at the party, right? Just, awful. They quote unquote heal from that relationship. They're no longer feeling emotionally devastated by it. They get back out there and they start dating again. Now, unbeknownst to them, they are primed to get sucked in by the opposite of that overt narcissist, which is not a healthy person. The polar opposite of that is going to be a covert narcissist, or more of like the sociopathic, that superficial charm, the love bombing, the attention, the adoration, all of this. And then they're not going to realize, they're going to mistake all of that intensity for sincerity, because it's easy to do. It's easy to think like, I thought this stuff only existed in fairy tales. And if they're out of tune with their internal alarms, which are going to be screaming at them, if they're out of tune with that, they're more likely than not going to be like, you know what, these red flags, these internal alarms must be going off inside of me. I must have issues with commitment or men or women or dating or unresolved trauma from my past relationship. But because I don't want to mess up a good thing, because I must have the issue, they've done nothing but make me their whole world and tell me that they've never met anybody like me before. And I feel this amazing soulmate connection with them. I don't want my past issues to screw things up. And so then they continue going forward, glossing over all of those red flags because it's not on their radar that charm and prince or princess charming is a major red flag, because they're not setting their radar to scan for that. They're only scanning for what was a problem, which was what they experienced before. And so then what happens is then boom, fast forward, and things probably will move really fast with the more of the sociopaths of the world out there. And then boom, they come back in 6 months or a year. Oh my God, I don't know what happened. I thought this person was different. If they're not linking up, and hopefully they come back, if they're not linking up correct cause and effect, which most people don't, because it seems like that they're not, like, these people are very different. So it can seem random. It's hard to figure out a pattern when the pattern doesn't seem like a pattern, you know? But then they can start thinking like, I must be cursed, or this is karma, or it's just a fluke. I must just attract these people. That's that external locus of control talking again. And I get it, because I've been there, like, where you're just like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I am like a lightning rod for these people. What is going on? And the reality is there's still pieces of information that you're missing. If you're continuing to keep attracting these people, there's something there. And they're attracted to anybody. It's not just you. It's not that you were in an abusive relationship and they can sniff that out. Like, they're attracted to anybody. It doesn't even matter. What matters is how long we keep them in our lives once we see their problematic behavior for what it is. That's what matters. That's what we have control over. We have no control over who we attract. So, yeah. Learning all of the signs, learning our vulnerabilities. It's like I've mentioned before, it's like weather stripping around your windows. You know, if you're missing some of this weather stripping, like, you're going to keep having cockroaches come in. And if you still have cockroaches coming in, there's still holes in that weather stripping, and we got to figure out what they are. So I think it is. True Seeker says it's often subconscious patterning from childhood. We learn in code. We learned. Let me read that again. It's subconscious patterning from childhood. We learned codependency. I think that's a big part of it. I think there's many different pieces to this, right? We grow up in a dysfunctional society. You know, like I was saying earlier, all of these movies and music, these kinds of idealized, toxic whirlwind romances are heralded as ideal. And, oh, they're so romantic. They're not. Like, this is, you know, Harvey Weinstein made these movies, right? Like, let's not take any romantic, comedy things from Predators. So, like, that stuff, it's not love. Like, love is based on appreciation and trust and honesty, and it takes time, and it's everything that is kind of just good and right. It's not chaos and craziness and bonding over dysfunction, and like, that's not love. It's not even in the same zip. It cheapens the idea of love. Like, it bothers me so much. Like, it's not even in the same zip code as love. And so there's that. part of it, that where we grow up in a dysfunction. We might grow up in a den of dysfunction. Our own family might just have really skewed ideas about love and commitment and family and connection and how they parented us. And we might have grown up feeling or being emotionally or physically neglected or abused. And then that can kind of set up this pattern of a person being in a scramble in order to get love, basically. A person can have, later on in life, they might have an amazing childhood, Norman Rockwell childhood, and they were married for 35 years to an amazing partner who unfortunately gets sick and dies. And then because this stuff's not taught, right? At least it's not taught at the level that it needs to be. And so then they finally take their advice from friends or from their therapist, start dating again. They crash into either a sociopath or a narcissist or an online dating scammer who preys on their vulnerabilities and their loneliness and drains their life savings, or they have a whirlwind romance. They get married within a year and now they've moved this person in who's a total parasite, sometimes it's just not on a person's radar that people like this walk the earth and they just don't know. Angie and I, in our live stream yesterday, we were talking about this, and I had mentioned I couldn't sleep the other night, and it was in the middle of the night, and I was watching I fell down some hole on YouTube, and I was watching videos of tsunamis. And there was some footage of the 2004 tsunami and, that hit India and Indonesia and that whole area. Death toll was over 250,000 people. It was just devastating on every single level. And one of the videos I was watching was this couple, a European couple that were on vacation in somewhere in Indonesia. And all of the water had rushed back into the ocean. And so they were filming it, and they were walking around all this wet sand with these boats that were just, left standing on what 5 minutes ago was, 10, 20 feet of water was now just sand. And so the camera is panning around and people are like, what is going on? This is so wild. And somebody had even mentioned, like, hey, do you guys think, could this have anything to do with the earthquake? And one of the people were like, no, that's ridiculous. Like nothing to do with that. And off in the distance, then another person said, you know what? All of the locals are running. Like, why are they running? And so then they pan back out into the ocean, and there's a wave, it's a wall of water, but it doesn't look like it's that big. And it looks like it's really far out. So it looks, probably registered that maybe it's like 20 feet tall, but it's still like far away. And they're still standing there like, this is so weird. What's going on? And, I don't know. I'm assuming that couple made it out because their footage made it out, but I don't know. Like they could have, I don't know. But the point being is they didn't know the signs of a tsunami. And how many people do? I wouldn't have known the signs of a tsunami. And so like you can't take self-protective action if you don't know the signs to look for, or if it doesn't match up what you think it looks like. Like when I would have thought of a tsunami, I would have thought of something out of out of a movie where there's like this 100-foot wave that's coming at you. I would not have realized the early signs that there's potentially an earthquake, or that all of the water rushes off the shore and that the ocean recedes by, I don't know, hundreds of meters. Like I wouldn't have connected that. I wouldn't have thought that there was this wall of water that's so far out, that's maybe 20 feet tall. I think most people would have thought, oh, that's a big wave, but it'll crest. Like it's not a big deal. Like it's not going to keep coming, right? So the point being, if what we're experiencing doesn't match up with our idea of what we think a problem is, we're not going to take self-protective action. It's the same thing with manipulators, especially like just like, and then there's the same thing, like the other people, you know, in that video where they were asking for validation, like, could this possibly be related to the earthquake? And the other person's like, no, you're fine. We're all fine. Like, no worries. That's, you know, and then scrolling down to the comment section of that YouTube, and people, there's all the peanut gallery is like, oh, these people are so dumb. Like, why didn't they realize it was a tsunami and blah, 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 blah. It's like, oh, well, yeah, you've got the benefit of hindsight. You know, like, I don't buy it for a second that many people knew the early signs of a tsunami. That's exactly how this kind of stuff happens. It's just, and then you've got people that are telling you, oh, no, it's fine. What you're experiencing, it's not a problem. It's just you. It's you. Like, you just must have issues with trust or commitment or whatever. Like, you know, gloss over your red flags. Gloss over those feelings that you have. Just keep going down the path you're going on. I'm sure it's fine. This person seems amazing. And then there's the peanut gallery. It's like, well, geez, why didn't you leave? Like, you're so dumb. Like, I can't believe you stayed. It's like, well, yeah, it's, you know, easy for you to see clearly, like, you're not emotionally invested in it. And it could happen to you. Like, just because it hasn't happened to you, like, doesn't mean that it won't happen to you. Yeah. Nikki's like, yeah, stop being so sensitive. Or Grace says, yeah, I get this a lot, Dana. Yep. People do. And I got into an argument with family when I was on vacation about this kind of stuff, because people like love to debate my life choices or try to get me to discuss them. And it used to really rattle me, but I am like, I guess it still kind of does, but I was trying to explain to them that, you know, nobody intentionally gets into a relationship, an abusive relationship, just like nobody intentionally joins a cult, just like nobody intentionally gets scammed by an online dating scammer, just like nobody intentionally like followed Hitler thinking that that was a terrible idea and that they'd go to jail and that their whole family for generations would be shamed. Like, nobody does these things willingly. And that's the piece of the puzzle. There's this jump in understanding, because it's so easy for any of us to look at that, to look at other people and be like, God, they're so dumb. Like, how did they fall for that? Like, that would never happen to me. And we would potentially be very wrong, because there's reasons. Most people everybody does things because they think that they're doing the right thing. It's depending on how, well, I should say, unless they're a psychopath or like profoundly mentally ill and not even thinking straight. But outside of that, like, most people tend to do things because they think that they're doing the right thing. So the question is, why did they think that they were doing the right thing? And it tends to come from a wide variety of things. Like, they just didn't identify that it was a problem. They didn't know better. Maybe that was somehow their new normal. Maybe they thought that they would see a problematic person coming. You know, I was trying to get my family to understand this. And I'm like, you know, it's like when we had the house fire back in May. I know to not go running back into a burning house. I know this. I used to teach CPR first aid. I used to really hammer home the importance of scene safety and to not create two victims. Like, it doesn't do anybody. It just puts more rescuers in danger. Like, you've got to make sure the scene is safe. When I was in that house fire, all of that was gone. And I was in total panic mode. I tried going back in that house multiple times, at least 5 times. And the only thing that stopped me is I could only get about 5 feet in, and the smoke was so thick and black, I couldn't breathe and I couldn't see. And so telling other people this, they're like, God, you're so dumb. Like, why would you, like, you shouldn't do that. I'm like, well, no, duh. Like, yeah, I know what you know and how you react and when you're panicked are two totally different things. Everything that you know goes out the window. It's just frustrating. And Nikki says, yeah, one huge thing is I stopped trying to find the good in everyone. Yeah. And to other people, that can seem like we're bitter, we're jaded. They might be like, I feel so sorry for you that you just don't have that. And then they think that they have this high moral ground. Well, I just think that love conquers all. And I think everybody has, good in them. And it's so important, like, just for us to see that. And that kind of stuff is so passive aggressive, and it's so re-victimizing, and it's so, it can be so crazy making, thinking that like maybe they're right. And maybe I am damaged goods because I don't think the same way as I did before. But the reality is there's some like evil people that walk around on this earth, and it's important that we spot their behavior for what it is and not try to gloss over it or justify it or make light of it. Like we need to see problematic behavior as clearly as we can so we can respond to it appropriately. Yeah. And Dawn says our minds just don't work like a narcissist, so we can't even see what they're capable of until it happens. And here's the thing too. I used this example before. I've been on this kick of watching like these true crime stories because I just find this kind of behavior, like unraveling all of it, fascinating, and how people get caught up with this and all of the different ways this kind of behavior goes down. And I mentioned this last week before, but I'll mention it again. There was a prisoner, I forget which state. Anyways, he was tried for, I think, multiple murders, and he was given life in prison. Well, he didn't want life in prison. He wanted the death penalty, and they wouldn't give it to him. And so he ended up killing his cellmate. And then they thought, and he said, I want the death penalty. And they said, we're not giving it to you. And so he was upset. They moved him to a maximum security prison where he then manipulated. So these people, maximum security prison, they are in their cell 23 hours a day. They get 1 hour outside, and it's like in a dog run cage kind of a thing. He convinces the guy next to him. He comes up with this plan. Hey man, how about we do this? I'm going to let you come near me. I'll choke you out. And then, but not like real bad or anything, but just like bad enough that you have to go to the hospital, and then your family can sue the prison for not keeping you safe. That's the plan they concoct. Well, what happens? So the guy falls for it. Okay, man, we're going to do this plan. The other prisoner strangles him and kills him and tells the guard, basically, and is like, I'm going to keep doing this until you guys give me the death penalty. I don't know what ended up happening in that case. I think he's still life in prison, but they just have a better eye on him. But the point being, even people that are highly manipulative, that other prisoners in a maximum security prison can still be manipulated. So it's not even like, we for sure have a hard time even having our guard up with or seeing this kind of stuff for what it is. But these manipulative people are really good at what they do. So, if it flies under your radar, or if you get caught up in it, I guess what I'm saying is all we can do is the best that we can do. I agree. Lauren says, I think people's knowledge and awareness also kind of goes out the window when they are feeling desperate too, myself included. Absolutely. So if you've seen, I started a video series called Red Flags of Codependency. And I highly recommend that you watch at least the first few videos in that series. There's a video in there about like empty buckets. And I talk about like there's these different, it's a kind of a take or spin on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you're familiar with that. So we have like these we all come into this world with these needs that we need to get met. And it's kind of going up this pyramid. And if you think of these needs as buckets, so we come into this life with all of these buckets that we need to get filled, and they get filled in a wide variety of ways, and they get emptied in a wide variety of ways. Like just, we've got to, when we're young, we rely on generally our caregivers to fill these buckets for us. As we get older, we are able to learn to fill them for ourselves. If we're walking around with a bucket that's low or empty, the more empty our bucket is, the less rational we're going to be, and the more rationalizing we're going to be. Because our brain, when this kind of stuff happens, when we have these vulnerabilities, it's like your brain downshifts, and all of this higher level functioning and reasoning, with Maslow, it's like, these kind of like actualization, even self-esteem, these higher order needs are no longer a priority. It's sort of like when a person goes into shock, your body, when it feels like you get shoved in ice water, or like the blood, it just leaves your arms or your legs, like it literally is leaving. That's why you feel that way. It's rushing to protect all of like your major organs. It all goes to your core. There's like this physical response to shock, but there's also like when we're trying to get these like emotional needs met and your brain downshifts, it's like all of the energy, I guess, or the juice that goes to these higher level thinking, that all drains down, and your your brain is focused on getting those. It's protecting those buckets that need to get filled, and we're going to be driven to get them filled. It's kind of like on a more mild end of that, like it's a lot easier to make healthy food choices when you go to the grocery store after you've eaten something. It's a lot harder to make good decisions when you're going on an empty stomach. It's the same thing with dating. It's the same thing with anything else. If you're starved out emotionally and you're lonely or you're scared or, what have you, if you're starved out emotionally and you start dating people, you're probably going to grab on to the first person that seems to even remotely show you attention. So good decision-making skills just go out the window when there's unaddressed vulnerabilities there. So it's interesting when you realize kind of how all that stuff works. New Life says it's important to see that killers can be normal-looking people like Chris Watts, so we don't trust automatically. Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's the Scott Petersons, the Chris Watts, the Bill Cosbys of the world. Casey Anthony, and I think this is, it's important that we realize that the problematic people can come in all different shapes and sizes and packages and genders and ages, and they can come across like Bill Cosby, like really seemingly charming, wonderful people. And it can take a little bit to see their behavior for what it really is, to start seeing cracks in their mask. And to realize, here's the thing too, is like there's a reason that they call targets of narcissists and sociopaths targets, because Bill Cosby, according to his wife, he was an amazing husband and father. He had this whole double life that she claims that she just really didn't know about. And she might have had suspicions he was cheating on her, but I don't think that he knew that he was drugging and raping women. But it's just, It's a problem. Okay, let's see here. That's really profound, Sam. Sam was saying he was so frustrated. He was hitting the emergency room due to suffocating blood pressure, headaches, all these things that he had never experienced before now. And he was so shocked to hear his voice say, "I miss myself." Wow. Wow, that's deep. Yeah, it's amazing like what our inner self knows, that still, even though we might not realize what we're in the middle of, or like the manipulation that's happened or any of this, like your inner self still knows deep down like what the issue is, and your inner self is just trying to register all of this to you. It's so cool how that part of us is always there, you know? Okay, let's see. Truth Seeker says, yes, abusers also rely on the ignorance of society. Yep, I agree. And I think too, it can be part of the entitlement of it all. You know, it's another thing I find so interesting in like these crime videos, like when they show the trials and then these killers start, some of them break down and start sobbing, and some of them just show no emotion. But like the ones that do show emotion, you know, it's not for the crimes they committed, it's for the realization of there's consequences for their actions. And like, and people can just so get that twisted, you know, and think like, oh, because they said the words, they said that they were sorry, there's tears, there's this, that, and the other. And it's like, don't get that twisted. You're not, they're saying what they need to say and doing what they need to do in order to get out of consequences. Like, not because they're sorry they got caught. They're not sorry for their actions. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Kitties are cute. That's a cute name. Kitties are cute, says, and because cult leaders do a lot of the same thing as abusers do, ex-cult members feel and go through a lot of the same things that survivors of narcissistic abuse do. Watching documentaries on cults can be very helpful. Yes, it's honestly, it's the same types of people. It's the same problematic personalities. It's just in a different setting. And yeah, the dynamic is exactly the same. I think the danger, or what can make a cult so destructive, is the delusional ability of the cult leader, where, you know, they might think that like, they've got some sort of supernatural power, or that they're some sort of direct connection to God, or you know, what have you. And people just really, you know, logic and critical thinking is not taught. And these kinds of people can be really persuasive. And obviously, right? I mean, like the Heaven's Gate cult, you know, I'm sure had you told those people a year before they joined, hey, guess what? In a year from now, you're going to eat poisoned applesauce because you think that by killing yourself, you're going to be able to go hop on a UFO that's hidden in the tail of the Hale-Bopp comet. Like, they would have thought you were nuts, you know, but you get around a person who's like persuasive enough, and they're pushing this truth, their delusional truth. And they think that they're a prophet, or that they're connected to interplanetary travel. Like, I don't even know. Like, and it's that slow descent into hell because you believe a little piece and then it's the next little piece and then it's the next little piece. And they're so convincing. And there might even be like some facts peppered in. And it's so tragic. It's so tragic. Okay. Ria was saying, she says, I'm aware that this was abuse and how lucky I am to have been ghosted. But smart narcissist knew how to put the knife in my soul. It's kind of saying, ha ha, until I get the last laugh. I think we can all relate to that. That's how it may feel. But honey, I guarantee you, like, there is the amount of personal growth that can come from these situations. There's a term out there. It's called post-traumatic growth. And it's massive amounts of personal growth that can only come from massive amounts of trauma. Like, there is, I know it might sound really hard to believe and maybe even re-victimizing to say this. There is so much good that we can get out of this. It'll blow your mind. Like, please, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, I'm not alone in this. Like, all of these insights. Here's something that helped me was the realization, because, the first time I got tangled up with a sociopath, I thought it was a hit and run. It was a total fluke thing. I thought this was like a Lifetime TV movie. It was a fluke. It'll never happen again. Right? Wrong. And then what was like 3 or so years later, I got tangled up with another one. And it was different degrees and different damage done in different ways. And that's when I realized, okay, there's a pattern. There's more going on here. What am I missing? And that was when my journey to healing began. And all of the realizations that came from that, I could not have gotten. The beauty of pain, the upside of experiencing tremendous amounts of pain like this, is that it really is a driving force for people to do something different, to take some sort of massive action. And I didn't know at the time what direction to take action in. I was just like shell shocked, basically, and just trying to survive. Now knowing, like, being on the other side of this, like knowing what I know now, is sort of like, what? None of this was ever about Jack or Steve. Like, had it not been them, it probably would have been somebody else, because there were big chunks of that weather stripping around in my life that were missing. And those cockroaches happened to crawl in, but had it not been them, it would have been other cockroaches. So reclaiming my power and control over this and realizing, okay, this wasn't just a fluke thing. Like, there's more going on here. Everything that we've been talking about tonight, like shifting how you understand love, like the difference between love bombing and love, the difference between like intensity and sincerity, between commitment and codependency, between healthy bonds and trauma bonds, between, that intensity and sincerity is a big one. The shifting the external locus of control and then the internal locus of control, shifting how you go about trusting other people, instead of being like, I just trust everyone absolutely and completely until they prove me otherwise, to actually, no, I value myself and my energy and my time and my emotions and my body. Trust is something that's now earned, not just freely given. All of these shifts that happen, people that I guarantee you that have not gone through something like this haven't had these realizations because they haven't needed to. So if we're all raised in this dysfunctional society that confuses all of these concepts, they're caught up in it too. They just don't realize it. So the benefit of our situation, I really feel like we are kind of just like this, I was going to say like silent minority, but I think we might even be like this silent, we're kind of like the growing resistance, I guess, of people that are coming together. You know, when I started all of this, I thought I was alone. I really thought my experiences were so unique. It was like again, lifetime TV movie kind of stuff. Like this stuff does not happen every day. And boy, was I wrong. And I began getting dozens and then hundreds of emails every single day from people from all over the world that were like, yes, this happened to me too. And oh my God, and this makes total sense and blah, blah, blah. And that's how all of this has grown. Like we're not alone in it, but there's so many people out there that are not connecting. They're only connecting part of the dots and part of the ways, and they're still missing big pieces of this puzzle. Once you get to this place where you're connecting all of the dots that you need to connect, and you're moving forward into like learning to be empowered, and you're learning about assertiveness and boundaries and standards and deal breakers, and you get rid of all of this toxic programming about like confusing, love bombing and love and trauma bonds and healthy bonds and all of this stuff, and you start seeing the world clearly, like your life will really work for you. So it's just such a game changer. And like, not only that, but like, that's how the cycle of abuse is broken. And here's the other thing with the cycle of abuse is there's this idea that it's just generational, right? And a lot of times it is. Like you grow up in a den of dysfunction. Like if we have all of this toxic programming about, codependency and commitment and this and that and the other, and if it's unexamined, odds are we're going to pass that down to our kids, and they're going to pass that down to their kids, and so on. And basically until something like this happens to somebody along the line and they connect all of the pieces in the right ways, that's when they'll be set free. But until then, the cycle is going to continue. The catch is the cycle of abuse can start at any time. This is what's so confusing, because if people only think of this cycle as like, oh, it's just due to dysfunctional parenting, and it's not. It's due to dysfunctional society and dysfunctional messages and dysfunctional programming that we get across the board, and like not understanding unexamined vulnerabilities and being out of tune with our intuition and our emotions and on and on. There's multiple things there. Until all of those pieces are connected, the odds are a person's going to runs a very solid risk of getting tangled up with manipulators time and time again. So there's a lot. I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot like game-changing, life-changing lessons that we can squeeze out of this, that not only can you go and like rebuild your life, but you can make your life even better than it was before. Because once you start reassembling, when you start examining all of these pieces, when your life, that's the beauty of rock bottom. When your life is blown apart and you're like, oh my God, like how did I get here? Where do I even start? When you start rebuilding, you have the beauty and power of that to start consciously rebuilding piece by piece. You don't have to, and you will start to examine things. Like once you've been made aware of, like, it's time to start from square one with examining your beliefs about other people and yourself and relationships and commitment and love and blah, blah. You're examining piece by piece, and you start assembling an authentic life. A life based on like your wants and your needs, and you're in tune with yourself, and you're like, you know what? Yeah. And I think most people here will start telling you, like, when you start getting down this track, this relationship that brought you to this point, it's like pulling a string on a sweater, and then it just keeps coming, and you're like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. And you start connecting all these dots with possibly other significant relationships in your life with either friends or parents, and you start seeing manipulation so much more clearly, and you start realizing, oh man, I've been in a lot of ways as people pleasing that maybe I was doing. it never registered as a problem, but yeah, maybe that's been going on for like a really long time. And here are some other ways that impacted me. And here's maybe some ways that I'm living a life based on like who I feel like I should be because my parents thought I should be this person, or that I should major in this topic, or what have you. And you start questioning everything, and then you start rebuilding piece by piece. And that's how you get to that post-traumatic growth. And it's awesome. The water here is great. Like, come on over, like it's here and it's possible. And seriously, there's nothing for those of us that I feel that have made it over to that post-traumatic growth part of it all. There's nothing special about us. Like, there's nothing, the only difference between us and other people that haven't made it over to that side yet is that they're not connecting the dots in the right way. Like, they're just not putting the puzzle together right. That's it. So, just keep moving in the direction that is the most authentic for you and that is the most empowering. Like, just as like the saying goes, if you find yourself walking through hell, just you keep walking. That's it. That's where you're at. Like, just move in the direction that gives you the most peace, that gives you the most calm, that feels the most empowering, that feels the most nourishing. Like, that's the direction. Yeah. And James says, it's very true. He says, if I can do it, so can you or anyone else. Yes. Yes, Sam. And I love this. Thank you for bringing that up because I love it so much. He says, and I'm probably going to say this incorrectly, that Kintsugi, I'm saying this totally incorrect. The Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold or silver, which makes the piece more valuable because it has history. He says, that's what's brought me here. We're more valuable than ever before. Yes, it's life. It's these the cracks in your pottery. It's character, and like you can do this. Like, you guys can do this. You can handle this. You've got this. There is another side to this. It's not always dark. Most of your best days are yet to come. This pain is not always this intense, and it doesn't last forever. Like, just keep moving in the direction that is right for you. That's healthy and nourishing and empowering. There's another tricky name. Maluk says, I don't know whether a therapist needs to know about NPD specifically, as long as they can help us with the CPTSD and stand firm on our own away from toxic people. I would agree with that. And I think another word that might be synonymous for narcissistic personality, just because that's the thing, is like therapists they're going to have some working knowledge of it. They're familiar with the DSM. This term is in the DSM. But again, knowing it and living it, two very different things. I had extensive knowledge. I was a psychiatric nurse. Before that, I worked in a domestic violence shelter. Like, I knew about everything in the DSM. And yet when you live it, like, it's that irrational invincibility, like, oh, this happens to other people. Or I'd be able to spot a sociopath coming, like, they're kind of just like the slimy looking child molesters out there. And like, they sometimes come across like Bill Cosby or Chris Watts. So if it's like, knowing about it's one thing, but living it is a totally different thing. And so, but the point being is, if they're familiar with manipulation and healthy but here's the thing too, like this kind of stuff, healthy boundaries, codependency, this kind of stuff is not taught, and it's not a part of the DSM. And it's a kind of a crapshoot if you can find a therapist that actually has healthy boundaries and has a healthy understanding of that, because it's been my experience that a lot of them don't, that a lot of them still subscribe to that view of, you just need to trust. And, like, love like you've never been hurt before. And they're confusing love bombing with love and all of it. These messages are so pervasive. And until you've lived it and you start questioning everything, you don't see it for what it is. So, like, I don't know. I guess the point being is, and there's don't get me wrong, like there's therapists out there that are phenomenal. They're worth their weight in gold, but it can take some digging to find one. Just because a therapist is a therapist doesn't mean that, you know, they have all this stuff figured out either. So. Yeah, Gigi says, and the DSM is more for overt and narcissists, and most of the hallmarks are what the narcissists think and believe. Focus on emotional and psychological abuse. Yes, those are the words that I would use when you're describing what happened to you. I would focus on emotional or psychological abuse, manipulation. I would talk about possible like exploitation if that was what was going on. I would describe the behavior: lack of empathy, lack of remorse, cold, cruel, calloused, indifference to the pain that they caused, these kinds of things. But yes, what, you know, like what's in the DSM pales in comparison to what any of us have lived. It's so much more than like what people understand. Heather asks Dana, can you please talk about techniques to deal with PTSD? So, yeah, I can do that. We're going to wrap up here in about 4 minutes. But so some of the best techniques out there, I have not tried these personally, but I've heard from other people. I've heard from trauma therapists, and just kind of what the research states is EFT, which stands for Emotional Freedom Technique. You might have heard it known as like the tapping therapy. So there's kind of this grounding statement and then like a series of taps that people go through. There's that. And then there's a therapy called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, I think is what that acronym stands for. And so finding a therapist that's familiar with either one of those things can really help to process trauma. I'm trying to think of other things. There is a medication out there if you're really, really struggling with night terrors or nightmares. It's been going on for a while. You can't sleep and you're just exhausted and you're dreading going to bed. There's a medicine that you might want to ask your doctor about called either, depending on which part of the country you live in, it's either prazosin or prazosin. It's a medication that the kind of the off-label use is to help with nightmares for PTSD. And it does, a lot of people report that it works for them. So that might be something worth looking into. There's yoga, there's trauma yoga, which is becoming more popular. So that's something. I think oftentimes it's not just one thing that helps a person recover, whether that's a physical accident or like an emotional accident that happens. It's kind of a multitude of things. So it's, you know, really tripling up on your self-care. It's being patient with yourself and realizing that, you know, you've been through a lot and it's going to take some time to recover, and getting into some support groups can help. If you are involved in a support group, it can help to, like a Facebook group, for example, it can help to turn off notifications for that group, because it's, you know, my Facebook group is really active. We get around 1 million posts and comments a month in there. So it's, you know, when you're getting notifications for all that, it's like blowing up your phone. So turning off notifications for groups that are really busy like that, and then only going in there when you're needing to go in there or when you're like emotionally prepared to go in there, can really help. Hypnosis. Somebody had mentioned earlier hypnosis, hypnotherapy. These kinds of things can help. Affirmations can help. Getting a mantra. I did a guided meditation video a while back. I'm still, Paul, if you're here, I'm so sorry. Paul and I are working on some other videos, guided meditation videos, but I just have had so much on my plate that I've been bad. I need to do better with that. But I did a guided meditation video on like affirmations and healing for CPTSD. You can find it I'll find it. I'll look it up while we're talking here. There's a lot of different people that do guided imagery kind of stuff. Jason Stevenson and Michael Seeley are two of my favorites. If you're interested in that kind of a thing, it really does help. Like listening to just, even if it's not about PTSD, even if it's about releasing anxiety, things that might even be kind of like related, right? Like getting grounded in yourself, positive affirmations, self-esteem, releasing anxiety, these kinds of things. There's lots of meditations out there. So spending some time doing that. I just tripling up on your self-care, nourishing yourself in every single way that you possibly can. It's kind of like, when you have the flu, you realize I have the flu, and you give yourself permission to curl up in like your comfy clothes, and you're on the couch and you're eating tomato soup and you're just taking it easy and you're being extra good to yourself. Like recovering from this it's like the emotional, and this is putting it mildly, but it's like an emotional flu. Think of it kind of that way. And just be extra good to yourself. Like it's okay to have some downtime. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to just not feel good. It's okay. It's just part of it. It's part of healing. So, okay. I hope that helped. Okay, so with that, let's do our grounding guided meditation thing, and then we will call it a night. And then I will see you guys next week. I be here 3 times next week. So you'll see me Tuesday, the live stream over on Angie's channel next week, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Tuesday. And then Wednesday we'll be back here. And then Thursday we're doing book club. So 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, book club. It's the last Thursday of every month. And this month we are reading the book Facing Love Addiction by Pia Melody. This is going to be an interesting discussion because there's some things in here that I really like, and there's some things in here that are really problematic that I think we definitely need to put into context. So that'll be next week. So with that said, let's take some time. This is your time now, 100% your time to just be in your body and relax and get grounded within yourself. So if you can, take some time to get comfortable if you're sitting or if you are laying down. And breathe. Just being fully present in your body. Continuing to breathe, inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. And inhaling through your nose and exhaling exhaling through your mouth. As you're continuing to breathe, turning your attention inward, and being still enough that you can feel your heart beating. Just taking a moment to just fully acknowledge and appreciate all of the amazing things that our bodies do every single moment of every single day. Just being in tune with yourself. And continuing to breathe. Now turning your attention to the top of your forehead. Noticing if there's any tension that you might be storing there, any muscle tightness. Just allowing your forehead to relax. Allowing your eyebrows to come down. Your eyes, any tension that you might be holding in your eyes to completely relax. Relaxing your cheeks and your jaw. Allowing your tongue to fall from the roof of your mouth. Just letting your jaw hang open. Feeling your face as it's completely relaxed. Relaxing the back of your neck and your shoulders. Allowing your shoulders to come down. Notice if you're storing any tension in there. You can roll them back, allowing your chest to open. Realizing that right now in this moment that you are safe, that you are here, that you are in control. This is your time. And continuing to breathe. And from time to time, turning your attention inward, getting in tune with the sound of your heart beating. Allowing that sensation to ground you fully in this moment. And allowing or bringing your focus back to your body. Relaxing your arms. Relaxing your hands, letting any tension go that you might be holding in your fingers or in your arms, allowing them to relax completely. Allowing your arms to just go limp and heavy by your sides. Relax your stomach. Unclench any knots that you might feel in your stomach. And again, realizing that you are here and that you are safe. Relaxing your hips and allowing your legs to fall into whatever position is the most comfortable. Relaxing your thighs, your knees, and your calves, relaxing your feet and your toes, allowing your legs to become heavy and to fall and stay in whatever position is the most comfortable. And continuing to breathe. Now let's take a moment to visualize a waterfall. Beautiful, calming, healing waterfall. Maybe that waterfall is about 10 feet in front of you. And it's magnificent. And you see people on the other side of the waterfall laughing and playing, knowing that once you pass through that waterfall, that you can experience that feeling of lightness and joy too. That you don't need to wait until you're fully healed or for some sort of future event to happen, that it's okay. It's okay to smile. It's okay to experience joy. It's okay to even experience just a sense of calm. And it's okay to experience that now. That while there is so much trauma and pain in our life, that on the other side, there's so many other positive, good things that are going on too. And that we can move towards that direction. And so as you start moving towards that waterfall, you have this realization as you go through it, it's going to just cleanse you of any negativity or fear or pain or hurt that you're ready and comfortable with releasing. And if you have some anger or fear or pain or hurt, but you're not perhaps fully ready to release it, you can visualize that maybe as a backpack that you can just take off. You're just going to set it down, you know exactly where it is, but for right now, and you can pick it up again at any time and put it back on, and that's okay. There's no judgment about that. But for now, you can take that backpack off, take that weight off, and let's walk through that waterfall to that place where we can just smile again. Allowing all of that cleansing water just come over you and wash away all of the stuff that you're ready to let go. And it's okay, that backpack is still there if you want to come back and get it. And on the other side of that waterfall, you see that lightness. And it's okay. And I would encourage you right now just to smile. Just to smile. You survived this. You've been through a lot. You are a warrior. You are so strong. Like, you got this. You can do this. Just smile, and if you're comfortable doing so, and take a moment just to give yourself just a hug, just that acknowledgement of, you know what, kiddo, you've been through a lot. So when you're ready, come on back, open your eyes, rejoin us. So thank you guys so much for for being here tonight. And I will see you guys next week. And just as always, you are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can move forward into post-traumatic growth, and you can go beyond healing from this. So take care. Have a wonderful rest of your night. And I will see you guys next week. Okay. Bye.